The Two Guys, One Shaker Cup podcast, hosted by Joshua Shaw and Ryan Buckeye.
We're coming at you live with Josh Shaw, the science guy. Well, not really. Not really. Josh Shaw has had this conversation on a multitude of occasions, most recently at I believe, a Sports Nutrition Expo Summit in San Diego. I think this topic was kind of the centerpiece of a conversation. And you may have said something that maybe made people upset. But what you said was 100% true. And the topic today is, like, we're in sports nutrition, which fundamentally should be a science-based industry. Like, what can be put together to help us actually improve on our fitness and health goals. But it's what you said. It seems like a marketing-driven industry versus science-based industry. So, are we marketing or are we science? Or is there a combination of both? If you're an upstart brand, like, should you do one or the other? We've kind of touched a little bit on that in the past, on some of that stuff, but I think the conversation revolves around more or less like what really is our industry today? In 2020, how has this industry evolved? Has it evolved? Has it stayed the same? Because I would almost argue, Josh, that the industry hasn't changed a lot. I just think it's exemplified now by digital and by our access to information.
Yeah, the topic, to your point, was kind of event based, in the Sports Nutrition Summit that I was just speaking at, was very much a crowd of peers that were probably science forward, or I guess like science leaning in the most of the crowd, of the couple hundred people in the crowd.
Right.
And the topic was what we were kind of talking. A question that was asked by the moderator was around, is the industry kind of marketing focused, or is R&D and science kind of taking a turn and becoming more of a popular thing? And
Right.
The people on the panel with me were very positive towards science, and I am also. I have no problem with having science-backed things and all that. But my point was that kind of launching something with a bunch of claims in today 2020
Right.
is not going to fundamentally create the next big thing, because first of all, you're probably not going to have exclusivity on that thing that you're marketing. You generally don't have finished product testing done on your specific product. And we can get into the reasons why people don't do that a lot of times today. But so you end up, piggybacking off of science from ingredient suppliers, and you have all these claims, you have all these things, and you kind of try to stand on it that way. But how does somebody know your brand over the 300 other ones that look similar from a formula standpoint to you, or at least to a common consumer looks similar? You know what I mean? There might be some nuances to your formula over somebody else's, but like a lay consumer, the mainstream consumer, do they really even understand the differences between product X, product Y, and product Z that have, a 10% difference in each one of them? And that's kind of also like where I kind of got fired up about this subject was a few weeks prior to that, and we talked about this in a previous podcast around the ABH recall and all that. Was a lot of people came out right after that kind of press release and was really touting, this is why people that self-manufacture their product should be the ones trusted, and everybody's marketing companies and everything. And I get where their stance is coming from, but it brought up a big point where a lot of people maybe were not understanding what that all meant. Why does marketing companies thrive in our space? Why is the makeup of our kind of industry the way that it is? And overall, it was just kind of one of these things where it was a topic that seems to still get a lot of kind of fire between people, because there are a lot of, in our industry, those that maybe are not necessarily in it to the deepest level that you and I are in, Ryan. Yeah. You have this interesting kind of world where there's the people that have been in the industry maybe since like the 90s and the early 2000s that are still kind of in it. And then you have, for whatever reason, it kind of seemed like it skipped 10 years. And then you have like where we're at, like we came into this, in the 2010. So you have this like weird like 10 years that it doesn't seem like there's that many people that are kind of out there. So you have this like interesting dynamic between the two sides, where you have people that understand the industry from a different angle, and then you have where we're at, where cool, there's a product that is a big piece of what the brand is about, but it's also like, how do you actually get people to notice your brand over the 10,000 other ones? We don't have, the I guess the luxury of only having to compete against 5 other brands that are selling the same product.
That's the thing that I laugh about sometimes, Josh, is people, science-based brands, right, who try to use their formulas as their marketing. And, our formulas are our marketing. That doesn't work. Like, that typically doesn't work. And I saw you're drinking a Total War RTD right now, which is fantastic, because people always will look at me and be like, how is Aaron Singerman doing what he's doing? Like, then they'll say something about the formulas, or they say, he's not using any brand ingredients. He doesn't have to. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad brand or you have bad products. Like, that's the thing. Like, that's where we say we're a marketing-driven industry. I don't have, and this is coming from me, a guy who touts superior formulas. I don't have a problem if you're a brand that is a marketing-driven brand. I don't. I have a problem if you're shortchanging the consumer, sure, but you can still double down on marketing and still provide something that has science behind it. You're just not out there waving your flag saying, look at all these amazing formulas that we have. What's funny is you'll never hear Aaron Singerman and the Redcon team ever talk about their formulas. It's not that they're bad. It's not that they're bad formulas. They just don't talk about them. They talk about the brand and what the brand does and the people that represent the brand. And they're the one of the largest brands in the space. And there are going to be a lot of people that probably listen to this and be like, okay, well, you're biased, Ryan. I'm not biased. I love business. I love marketing. I think they do a fantastic job of that. But I also can look at those formulas too and say, they're not half bad. But, he doesn't need to use brand ingredients. He doesn't need to go out there and scream. And it's funny because at that event, you're on stage with Jim Sapani. And for a long time, like, Jim was one of those guys who was like, well, we have full transparency. And he kind of used that as his marketing avenue. And, he at one point called out other brands for not being. And then, at some point, he had to put his foot in his mouth because he got called back out from other brands, which was funny for us in the space. But it's not like, and that's the thing, like, how many of the average consumers care? And I know we've talked about this before, and I would say 95% of the consumers don't care. Why? Because they walk into Costco, they see a twin pack of C4 for $40, and they buy it like it's fucking bread, man. They buy it every single day. That formula, and the NutriBullet team knows this, that formula is not based on science, not good. Yep. But that formula based on sales is fucking fantastic. Fantastic. Yep. And it's something, too, that Cellucor is not going to go out there and say, we have carnosine beta-alanine. Granted, it's dosed at, I think, 1.6 or something like that. But, like, they're using a branded version of beta-alanine. They don't even have to, but they're using it. But they're not really touting it very much. And so, if the consumers that care, kudos to you. I'm happy because you're doing the time. You're listening to our channel, Price Plows. And Josh doesn't really talk about formulas at all, but you're taking time to educate yourself on what you're putting in your body. But the vast majority, if people really gave a shit, if this was a science-driven industry, companies like Herbalife and Advocare and things like that would not exist. Like, they would not be. Herbalife would not be the largest sports nutrition brand in the fucking world. It just wouldn't happen. So it's one of those things like. Newsflash, like, if you don't have an effective marketing campaign behind your brand, you're going to be stuck on a plateau for the most part. I think the term or the number that a lot of people throw around in this industry, Josh, is 10 million. Like, it's really hard to get above that $10 million mark for a lot of these brands. They're like stuck there, and they're stuck there forever, and they can't figure out why. And a lot of times it's these brands who, and if you're a brand that's science-driven and you're trying to use your formulas to be your marketing avenue, you probably will never even reach 10 million, to be quite honest. You could. NutriBio's over 10 million for sure, but they also have some marketing. They use their formulas, but their marketing campaign is their full transparency and their self-manufacturing, and they're not necessarily using their formulas as marketing. But that's about as closest that I can think to a brand who really kind of talks more on the education point of view that's over a $10 million company.
Yeah, that $10 million mark is interesting because then it kind of gets you into a different sales channel outside of like a specialty where you have somebody that is there to educate you a little bit. Like, if you stop into a GNC or a Vitamin Shop, regardless of what consumers talk shit about them and they'll be like, oh, they don't know shit or whatever. Like, they know a lot more than the Walmart employee that if you ask them a question about what you should buy in their active nutrition section, I'll tell you that straight up. So, like, at least there's some element of like education that you're going to get from that employee. They're going to try to help you. So if you're the top brands in one of those big specialty retailers, you might be able to, you could reach over $10 million. But for the vast majority of the ones that aren't, the top sellers in those ones, you usually are then moving into a different sales channel that then needs to be, you're selling on something that really isn't, somebody's going to be able to teach in that space.
Right.
And that puts you into an area where then it becomes more geared around marketing, elements that are outside of the formula, because a common consumer that's walking into a Walmart or a Target does not have the education level to really understand the products to which they need. And I know some people have a counterpoint to that and saying like, well, there's, a ton of sales on vitamins and minerals and things like that. That's totally true. And that's mostly because as a consumer, you only have so much capacity for information based around how interested you are in a certain topic. Like if you are, trying to regulate your blood pressure or something, you're going to be probably really intense on like maybe some of the things that you need to regulate that. Yeah. 100%. You might also take a bunch of other ingredients for like, general health and whatever, but like you probably don't take the time to actually learn that to the level that you're learning to that one goal that you're trying to reach. Right. So yeah, you can go in there and be self-directed and buy the things you need to like regulate your blood pressure. But when you start getting outside of that really deep interest, then you're going on just like some of your other purchase behaviors, like, oh, I like the look of this label. I like the, the packaging. I like the flavors. I like they go into a different kind of purchase criteria that they're looking for. So I think in sports nutrition, because it's like a totally like additive type of a thing, like people are not taking sports nutrition products to get necessarily healthier. They're optimizing some element, trying to get stronger. They're trying to get, whatever it is. It's not like somebody goes out and purchases a pre-workout because they're trying to, work on their diabetes issue. You know what I mean? It's not like it's. So I think that there's somebody has to be really interested in sports nutrition to actually get to the point of like knowing the product's ins and outs to the level of like efficacious doses, scientific level, and that's. Very admirable if somebody gets to that level. I love hearing from like the 0.1% online that talks about, on your guys's or Stacked or Price Plow or, like I'm like amazed that they get to this level, especially when, they probably could care less about anything around medical health or wellness and regular health and, whatever. But like they get like super intense on these things. And I'm like, super cool. But like, that's not the majority of the consumers. The consumers are literally saying, hey, I need more energy. How do I get that? Yeah. They go to the thing that either is the most amount of scale, like you said, a C4. They go into Costco. It's a good price. They pick up the 2-pack. They're good to go. They go on Amazon. They type in pre-workout. It says it has 4,000 reviews that are a 4.6. They go, cool, this one's for me. They buy it. And they don't think anything about it past that point. It's good. As long as it works, it doesn't upset their stomach or something like that. They're cool with it. If it works really well, they probably tell some of their friends. And it works well. It's not like it needs to be this thing where like, oh, well, I'm not getting the best value because it actually has 0.1 gram of beta alanine less than this one. And I know I need to get 3.2 because that's what the medical journals tell me. And it's like nobody gets to that level. No, they don't. And they don't need to, honestly, quite frankly. I mean, that's first off, people are lazy. And that's a safe point. Like we don't. Most people, if they read at all, they read for fun or entertainment. They don't really read for educational purposes unless you're forced to throughout high school and college. And, I would be amazed even if that person walking to Costco actually pulls out their phone and even goes to Amazon, looks for a review. They probably see the $29.99 price tag or whatever it is for the twin pack and say, this is a great price. Boom, and they take it. They know it's got caffeine in it. But what's funny is, like you mentioned, that most people don't care about their general health. They don't care about their general health until they have to. And that's when a doctor says, you need to take insulin. You need to take this blood pressure medication. At that point, that's the only industry in which basically is a science-driven industry. I mean, in terms of like things you take, because, yeah, you see some marketing campaigns on television or in a magazine here and there, but I can't imagine many people, walk into a doctor's office and say, I need XYZ brand of blood pressure medication. I mean, maybe they do. I'm not really in that target market. But I would imagine like you rely on the expert, which is the doctor, to prescribe you what he thinks you should be taking. You're not going to go, and most people aren't going to, do their research prior to having a blood pressure issue to take a medication or take a over-the-counter dietary supplement to help them regulate their blood pressure correctly. I mean, I do because obviously I care about my long-term health, but I am 0.001% of the population that does. So it's like, okay,
unless you're being told by an authoritative figure like a doctor, who our society will always look at as an authoritative figure, especially because it's, they think life and death. That's what a doctor kind of does. Like, either I'm dying or I'm living. And and if I'm dying, a doctor can save me through a pill or a serum or some shit. But within dietary supplements, it's like, oh, man, I just seen that really cool ad on Facebook. Or, they're running a 35% off sale. Or I went to GNC and this so-called expert told me to take BPI's best aminos or whatever it might be. It's like, that's a big difference too. Like, to be a sales rep at GNC, you don't have to go through 8 years of college, like a doctor does. So, I mean, you base your stuff on bro science, and even though I'm not saying they're not educated, there are a lot of GNC, vitamin shop, supplement shop reps who are educated. But at the end of the day, for them, it's a profit-driven business. Same with hospitals. I'm not saying hospitals aren't profit-driven businesses, because they are. But I mean, to me, it's miraculous. You mentioned that small percentage of population that's on my platform or Price Plow platform that talks. What's so comical to me is those are the people that brands listen to. Those are the people that brands sit back and be like, well, they want more of this. Who's they? Who's they? The 6 people on Facebook? The 10 people on Instagram? Are you fucking kidding me? They are not representative of the population at whole. So, I mean, I get it. There are people who sit behind their keyboards in this space who consider themselves superior formulators and are thinking, well, they don't think we have enough citrulline in this product. So I think we should reformulate it and go from 5 to 6. I mean, you guys, if you own a brand, like, yes, I appreciate good formulas, and I always will. But you got to stop listening to the people on those channels that are saying that they need. If it's something based on taste, that's different because that's subjective, sure. Yeah. But like when it comes down to like formulations and stuff, like you should know more than them if you're formulating a product. But a lot of people that formulate products, like, I mean, I probably know more than them. But at the end of the day, like if they have a superior marketing campaign, they're going to win. So it's just, I always find it funny how many times I get a call from somebody or something saying, well, there are people shitting on this formula. Okay. You've been to Stack before. How many times has a formula been posted and people just shit on the formula? And by people, I mean like 10 people, maybe at most. Yeah. And then everybody starts talking. Well, the fans, they don't like the formula. The fans don't know the fucking formula because there are going to be people who are going to buy that product. I am a case in point, and I'll say it on this podcast. I'm not a fan of Bucked Up in terms of the formulation. I think Deer Antler Velvet is a bunch of bullshit. But they sell so much of that stuff at a premium price. It's not worth that price tag, but people buy it because they're a marketing-driven company. And who am I to call out Ryan, the CEO of that brand, and be like, you're an idiot because he's winning. He's winning. I'm not winning like he's winning. So, if fans don't want to take the time to educate themselves and they want to buy into a cool-looking buck on a package that does look cool, they have that right.
I've always said, like, if you formulate or create products and brands for the 0.1% that comment on some of those things, you'll be the quickest bankrupt company out there because those customer or those, I guess I'm using customer, but really those people don't even really buy the products that they're commenting on or even that they are fans of because most of the time companies are giving them products for free because they are advocates or people that talk about this, and you're interested to see what people think about it that are interested in sports nutrition because there's not that many of them that are going to be following a social media account about sports nutrition. So like there's a ton of people that take sports nutrition, but there's very few of them that actually want to follow the news and interested in all the little details about the industry or whatever. So it's an interesting dynamic. I do want to make sure that everybody knows listening to this, like though Ryan and I are commenting around like marketing companies and the industry is run by marketing companies.
Right.
We're not saying that we are advocating that these companies utilize that in a negative way or to manipulate the consumer bases to create bad products and whatever it is. I mean, it's buyer beware. I mean, honestly, the information is out there for anybody. If you get taken, quite honestly, I don't really have that much like empathy to people because like literally if anything you want to buy, if it's a car, it's a house, it's a whatever, like trust me, there's tons of information if you look further enough for it. Right. And I think that you learn pretty quick about certain products that maybe you don't know too much about. And I think that we're not saying that that's a good thing. We're not saying that people should be, utilizing that in a way to manipulate the consumer bases. But what we're saying is that if the industry is moving towards transparent labels and it's moving towards a ton of brand explosions because of like low barriers of entry and the ability for a few clicks to start your own direct to consumer and Amazon listings, you have a very competitive landscape that everybody is easily able to copycat each other and able to do the same exact thing. So the only thing that you really can stand behind is like what you could build on top of that, which is kind of the brand experience, the brand, the marketing, whatever we're talking about here is like the difference. Now we could talk about the other side of like, there's sometimes you could have superior back end things, like, how to acquire customers in certain ways, or how to do things like that. Like, multi-level marketing companies do well at that. Companies that do well with affiliate marketing, Amazon people that do really well on that platform. There's ways to like, figure and build a brand without having to be like a crazy marketing company. But the point of that is like, okay, if everybody is in the sea of sameness, how do you stand out? And the way to do that is to be, to create this marketing story, create this brand experience that's a little bit different. It's not necessarily going to be the science unless you are like, Abbott Nutrition or something that can create branded ingredients because you have huge R&D teams, you have huge budgets because you're a pharmaceutical company that can go through that and realize like, we're going to create an advantage. That's not the 99%, 99.999% of the brands in our space. They don't have the capital to be able to put in that effort. So then you're buying ingredients, branded ingredients that everybody else has access to. So then you're in the same boat. Even if you have those labels or those fancy icons on your labels, it doesn't necessarily do anything for you because somebody could just go to that branded ingredient and say, hey, I'd like to put that in my product too. And they go, cool, great. So there's not a lot of like actual exclusivity. So then it gets to this point where like, where do you go? What do you do? If you're going to be standing just on your label product attributes and just say, okay, this is what our product has. It has 6 grams of BCAAs, it has 6 grams of citrulline, it has this, and this is all efficacious dosages, and you should be all about it because you should know that this is a great product. Nobody's even going to know that even exists, let alone be able to read the label or anything. So it's like, that argument I think is valid maybe 10 plus years ago, but like in today's world, you won't exist. You won't even sell your first $1 million. Like I made that comment to, Jim Stoppani on stage, and it wasn't in a kind of I didn't want to make it in a negative way, but it was kind of like, hey, if it's 2020, you're starting today and you're not Jim Stoppani and have like all these years of influence and you have all this following and you come out with the same exact product and you name it Jim Supplements or whatever, good luck. It's not going to happen for you. You know what I mean? Like, because there's 100 other people trying to do the same thing that have the same, mindset as you. It's like, how do you actually stand above and beyond those people?
Yeah, there's, so a lot to unpack there. I want to start like, okay, the brands who formulate for the consumer first innovation is what I like to call it. Like, you don't have to over-engineer your product first off to be a consumer first driven brand. So, but the brands who are essentially trying to give the entire kitchen sink to a consumer in a dietary supplement are brands, to Josh's point, that are they may make enough money to support the owner's living, okay? But you're not going to make much more than that. I mean, it's going to be tough. Like, I think a brand like Morphogen Nutrition. Ben is a great dude, stamp dude. Have you even heard of the brand before?
I have, actually.
Okay, so, but you're in the space. I bet you most people outside our space, or even some people within the industry probably have not heard of them. Great formulas, great formulas. Expensive because he uses such high doses of ingredients that I would love to see his P&L, because I don't think, his margins. I mean, he's got to sell a product for $60. Now you're pricing yourself outside the market, and now you're only going after that small niche of consumers. And quite frankly, all those people who are talking online saying they want more, they won't pay a dime over $40 for a pre-workout. So like, they always want more for less. Well, you can't fucking do that and stay in business. So it's like, okay, I'm going to create a $60 pre-workout because the people want that. And God bless the people. I love those $6 pre-workouts because they're good, but you just don't need to do that. You still need to have a responsibility to running a business. And I think, to double down on just being a science-based company, it just doesn't work because it doesn't resonate with the general population. Another case in point, take I'll call Cellucor a marketing-driven company in today's world. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so they came out with their C4 Dynasty, 10-year anniversary pre-workout. Over-engineered the shit out of it, okay? Way too much in it. I appreciate that.
I call that the fuck you product. That's like the like they've heard all the hate for so many years on the regular C4, and because they have the ability to do it, they just create a fuck you product to the whole industry and say, okay, now what?
100%. Like, hitting each pathway in the pump 20 times. I mean, just throwing in similar ingredients because they can and because they're branded and because it's expensive as shit. To your point, it was Nutrabolt standing up and saying, fuck all y'all. We can do what we want. $70 pre-workout for 20 servings. 7-0. Okay? That's not a made-up number. That's legit. I walked into GNC the other day, $69.99 on their store shelf. Thankfully, I got 3 tubs for free. Appreciate it, Greg. But at the end of the day, I'm not spending $70 on that product, and I'm in the space because to me, I look at that and say it's over-engineered. It's got too much of something. I would love to see. They probably did fairly well on sales just because they built a lot of hype with it. But I wonder, how many people are walking in the GNC dropping $70 on that thing right now?
I don't know.
I mean, it's cool packaging, and depending on what Cellucor does, and at full price, I'm not talking discount. At full price, at $69.99, my guess would be that product sits. Because right next to that is in the GNC, there's a Ghost Legend pre-workout for $40, which is not a bad pre-workout, but it's $30 less for, I think it's 20 servings or 30 servings in Ghost Legend, so more servings too. Like, it's just like, even the people who say they care, do they care enough to buy? And that's a question I think a lot of people need to ask. It's like, okay, this small percentage of the population, they truly care. But when it comes down to actually pulling out that piece of plastic called a credit card and making that transaction, do they really care? And I think that's a big thing. There's a lot of noise out there that I think brands need to navigate through and figure out what's the validity of these comments. And sure, they might want more creatine monohydrate or want whatever it is, but are they first? And if they buy that product one time, are they going to be a repeat purchase, or are they going to be like, okay, that product didn't give me much more than X. X is also $15 cheaper, so I'm going to go back to that one. It doesn't necessarily create it does create loyalness with some consumers. Like, people who buy Morphogen Nutrition because they're loyal customers. But it's hard to grow a business in terms of revenue, and not to say that every business and brand owner is doing that, because there are a lot of stand-up brand owners who are like, I'm not about that. I get it. But for the general consensus and the general portion of this conversation, we live in a marketing-driven world.
Yeah, and I think the science aspect of it can be marketing as well.
Yeah.
But it needs to be, digestible in a way for the audience. I can sit on my YouTube channel and pontificate and use all these crazy high-level SAT words, and nobody's going to understand it. Does it actually add any value to people's lives if they can't understand it? It doesn't. So you have to utilize the language that people are going to understand. And scientists and the science around our industry, for whatever reason, doesn't get to the level of where the consumer is at. So they can't ever get to the point where they're explaining their science to let a consumer create action.
Right.
Like, do they actually get up and offer up their credit card for something based around the information you're giving from the science side of the organization? So that's kind of where I always kind of stop at this whole argument, because I think science is great, but you're not actually being able to put it in a digestible manner that the consumer, the one that's actually driving the industry, is going to be interested in it. So you have these brands, years and years ago, that used to do a bunch of self-funded studies on their finished products, and
right.
Maybe they self-funded it, but also had a university do it, and whatever it is. And what you kind of found out over the years is people would, as the internet kind of grew, you had people that would tear it down because there was biases. Obviously, if you're funding a study, it's going to be only the best things 100%. That come out based around what elements you want to come out. So it's okay, is there actually a benefit for spending all that money to do that when you could just pull the science that the ingredient houses are putting out on theirs and let them defend their own studies? Right. Don't defend your studies that you paid for, that people are just going to say straight up it's biased right off the bat. So it's kind of like that, to the point of an over-engineered type of a situation. Do you invest in that when it's not going to really make a incremental difference to just pulling structure function claims from a branded ingredients study or whatever it is? It doesn't make much sense to do it the way that you want to spend a bunch of extra money to have a finished goods kind of site. I mean, I would love if that was the case, but the problem is it's like it's not really worth this. The juice isn't worth the squeeze, I guess, in that case. And I just go back to like, if you're going to be putting a science foot forward in your products, in your brand, you need to be able to distill that information down in a way that actually is like useful to the consumer. If not, you're better off trying to talk about an aspirational lifestyle, talk about maybe some purpose-driven aspect of your brand or whatever, because that story is a lot easier to describe to consumers than it is to describe to them what's the pathway and the Krebs cycle and this and that and how it's going to make all these, like, you're going to shut off really quick.
Not even just useful for the consumer, but impactful. I think that's a big one. Like, it could be useful, they could comprehend it, but if it's not impactful, a lot of the stuff nowadays to the average consumer, it increases nitric oxide by 230%. That's a massive number. Doesn't mean shit to the consumer. I mean, because they don't even know what nitric oxide is, and what it does. It's like, okay, it's going to increase blood flow. Okay, what does that mean for me? You're going to look bigger in the gym. How much bigger? Not that much bigger. I mean, so if you can create something that has a superior impact, saying like, it'll take your mile from 6 minutes to 5 minutes. That's impactful for an endurance runner, right? Like, that's an impactful statement. Now, obviously, we're not going to have that made, or, Josh takes this thing that's, cures ED. So that was an impactful thing for Josh to buy. So he went out there and made sure he got that, because in his old age, he needs to, and he took a lot of the old Jack 3D, and that's what happened to him. So, but that's the thing, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, all these science claims are cool to nerds and geeks like me who love it and who are looking for a competitive advantage and that extra 5 to 10% where I can. But for the average consumer, 95% of them, which is still, I think, low. I mean, unless it's an impactful claim or something that they can feel, whether, caffeine or beta-alanine, it's a tough sell. So if you guys agree with us or disagree with us, either way, we'd love to hear. You can go ahead and converse with us over at social media. We're on Facebook, 2 Guys, 1 Shaker Cup. Obviously, we post these to LinkedIn as well. You can follow us or watch this and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, watch via YouTube. We do this weekly every Thursday. So any ideas for topics that you guys might have, whether you're in the space, outside the space, whatever it might be, Josh and I collectively have a couple years of experience in the space, and we've been around the block a time or two. So any parting words, Josh, of wisdom for brands out there?
No, I mean, I think it's just lead with what you're great at. Even if it is science, just make sure that you can describe it in a way that's, like you said, impactful. If not, it's just a bunch of noise. And
if it's not impactful and it's a bunch of noise, Bill Nye the Science Guy literally is still alive. Bring him in, do a marketing campaign around it. Guarantee you'll sell at least one extra bottle or container of whatever it is that you're talking about.